This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. We are fresh off of Tough Mudder, Arizona, and it was awesome. My guest today is Walter Lyon of Team 4 Eyes fame-ish, and he was there. He ran Tougher Mudder on Saturday in the first wave, and we're going to have a conversation about it in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about Tough Mudder, Arizona. I ran on Saturday with some people from Kansas and a guy from Las Vegas, but I did not get their names. Or I got their names, but I didn't write them down, and it's 3 days later. So, guys, hey, shoot me an email at willhicks@gmail.com if you ran with me on Saturday, and I will make that right. And then on Sunday, Fun Day, I ran with a big group from World's Toughest Mudder, and that was great. I'm using the word run a little liberally there, but it was a good 10 miles. I was with Jim Campbell, Laura Foster, John Glines, Heather Bodie from the Overcome and Run podcast was with us for a while. Jim Baker, Heather Heaton, Tiffany Obb, who will be our guest next week, Mike Steven, Ed Grolau, Jay Mazza was there. I got to meet him in person. Good to see you, Jay. Amber Furman. I know I'm forgetting some people. I am very sorry. Shoot me an email, again, at willhicks@gmail.com. and I will correct my error. One World's Toughest guy, Neil Gerard, did Arizona with his wife, Amanda. Amanda has worked pit crew for Neil at World's Toughest twice before, but this was her first time running a full Tough Mudder, and she did great. Here's the audio of them at the end at Electroshock Therapy. They're holding hands doing an iron cross through electroshock. You can hear halfway through when they give each other a kiss, and then also at the end, another big kiss.
There we go. They are in the world's first husband and wife iron cross. Keep moving forward, honey. Get that arm up. Get that arm up and out. Look at this. And not only that, we're going to throw in a little electric love right in the middle. Come on, y'all. Electric love right there. Do it. Do it. Yeah. The Iron Cross, husband and wife effort. Very nicely done. Amanda and Neil with the first ever husband and wife electric cross with electric love in the middle. Nice. Woo. What is not to love? Yeah. Wow. Hey, if you didn't bring it up for everybody, knock it off.
And of course, that was Clinton Jackson, the finish line MC, getting them through. Last week we had Cassie Hereth on the show, and she talked about what she's been going through over the last several years. And she also ran Tough Mudder, Arizona. It's her home course. And she wrote something really good about the event this weekend I wanted to share. Yesterday was my first event after a trying year, after beating cancer, after being worried that I wasn't ready yet, and it was amazing. I fell in love with Tough Mudder all over again, with the course and the people, and that feeling you get when you succeed after thinking you may not. I had no bib, I wasn't a WTMer or multi-time runner, I was just a brand new me running the course for the very first time, being supported by people I love. Strangers cheered when I conquered Funky Monkey, and I cheered when they conquered obstacles they were afraid of. It was raw and real and amazing. This year, I hope you have at least one event where you go in bare bones, lose the bib, the miles, the laps, the ego, and just be a mudder. It will help you remember why we started to do this in the first place. Good job, Cassie. Well done. A few weeks ago, I asked you to email me if you were going to any of the international Tough Mudders or the Toughest Mudder in England. I will not be going overseas for a Tough Mudder this year, so I'm going to need someone to record some audio for me or talk to people over there, or even record video. I can pull the audio off of it, and maybe I can use it on the podcast. So I actually got some emails, and I wanted to read one of them to you. Hello, fellow Mutter Will. Just want to start off by saying I really enjoy the podcast. You mentioned for people to email you if they're heading overseas to any of the Tough Mudder events. I'm not heading to the ones in May, but I'm signed up for the Tough Mudder in Ireland. I reside in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. You may have to Google it. My first Worlds was exciting for me. It was the last year in New Jersey. My goal was to get my brown bib. I finished short at 40 miles. I didn't have the proper shoes, unfortunately. It felt like my feet were broken. My second WTM was a bigger disappointment. I was not in the shape that I needed to be in. My goal again was to get my brown bib. I cracked my tailbone on the cliff. I continued to push through because I'm stubborn, but when that sandstorm hit and my tent was in pieces, I went back to the strip. I'm heading back to Worlds this November. I have unfinished business. So I'm going for my brown bib and to get Sean to give me my 10X headband. I'll end my email now. I could go on and on. I look forward to meeting you at this year's WTM and keep up the awesome job on the podcast. Brian Angstadt. Brian, thank you for that email. You can email me at willhicks@gmail.com, or even better, if you enjoy the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review. I would sincerely appreciate it. Just write 1 or 2 lines about the show. It'll take you literally 20 seconds. Before we talk to Walter, I want to talk about Toughest Mudder LA from a few weeks ago. Chad Trammell was on the Obstacle Racing Media podcast with Matt B. Davis last week. Chad finished second to Ryan Atkins after leading Ryan for most of the 8-hour race. After you listen to our little show here, if you're still jonesing for some Tough Mudder information, you should check out the Obstacle Racing Media podcast. Subscribe. Matt has a new episode up almost every Friday. And Matt, I heard your new sound effects going into your interview with Chad, and they are outstanding. Last year, Chad had a disappointing performance in Asheville at the Spartan Race that was part of the US Championship Series that NBC televised. He talked about how that race performance impacted his schedule for this year.
That race made me realize that I can't travel for morning races on the East Coast that well, which was part of my decision for this year to not jump in the Spartan TV series, because they have 3 East Coast races. And I just, I like to think I'm invincible with travel stuff, but with that 4-hour time difference and racing at 7 a.m. And not wanting to take much time off work to travel, just don't think it's going to be my forte. I might not do any of the TV series this year, just because I want to focus on the toughest races, and it's a little tough to train for both. I know that Ryan Atkins is going to do it, and I think he'll be able to pull it off. But just the timing of those races work out in such a way that I'm not sure I'm going to hit any of them.
Then Matt asked him if he was planning on doing all 6 toughest races.
The ones I'm planning on doing right now are, the one near you is at the end of April, but I'm doing the Boston Marathon this year and kind of focused on that. So the turnaround's a little too fast for that. And then, skipping that one, and then England and Philadelphia are back-to-back weeks. And I decided to go to England and not do Philadelphia. I have an aunt that lives there, so going to go and race internationally, which will be fun. But then I do plan to go to Whistler and Chicago area after that. So there will just be 2 that I miss, basically.
Okay, so Chad is not doing the NBC Spartan Race series this year, and he is doing 4 of the 6 toughest races. We know from Matt's interview with Ryan Atkins last week that he is going to do the Spartan Race US series for NBC, and he is also going to do all of the toughest mudders except for the one in England that Chad is flying over for. So here's how that breaks down for Chad and Ryan schedule-wise. March 25th was Toughest Mudder LA. Chad and Ryan both ran there. Ryan narrowly beat Chad. April 17th is the Boston Marathon. Chad's running that. April 22nd is the Spartan Seattle Super NBC race. Ryan is running that. Chad's not running that. April 29th will be the Toughest Atlanta. Ryan is running that. Chad is not running that. In May 13th, will be Toughest Mudder Europe in the UK. Ryan is not running that. Chad is running that. May 20th is Toughest Mudder Philadelphia. Ryan is running that. Chad is not running that. June 3rd is the Spartan Monterey Super NBC race. Ryan is running that. Chad is not. June 17th is Toughest Mudder Whistler. Ryan and Chad will both be running this race according to their schedules that they told Matt in the last 2 weeks. Whistler will be the first time Ryan Atkins and Chad Trammell have raced against each other since Toughest LA, and that will be on June 17th. Like Los Angeles, Whistler is an extremely hilly course. It's the only other Toughest Mudder course that's going to compare to LA as far as the hills. It's at a ski resort, and it's going up and down a ski hill. July 8th is the Palmerton Spartan Super NBC race. Ryan will run that. Chad will not. July 29th is the Asheville Spartan Super NBC race. Ryan will run that. Chad will not. August 26th is Toughest Mudder Chicago and the Spartan West Virginia Beast NBC race. This is the last race in the NBC series on August 26th. It's also the last race in the Toughest Mudder series. This is the only weekend where there is a direct conflict between the two races. Because of the way Spartan works their points in their US Championship Series, Ryan could have the US Championship wrapped up and not have to even run this last race to qualify as the US champion. That's what Lindsay Webster did last year on the women's side. She had it locked up before the last race. She took the last race off and she rested. If Ryan does run in Chicago, this will be the third time this year that Ryan and Chad have raced each other. First is LA, second is Whistler. The third will be in Chicago on August 26th. I realize I'm only talking about Ryan and Chad right now. That's just because of what happened in LA and the narrow finish, the exciting finish between the two of them. There are a ton of other guys that are going to be in the mix, though. Glenn Race finished third in LA. He had 45 miles. Austin Azar and Chris Mendoza both did 100 miles at World's Toughest last year. They did 40 at Toughest LA. Mark Jones also finished in the top 5 at LA. All those guys, except for Chris Mendoza, finished in the top 5 and will be elite contenders at World's Toughest. Don't feel bad for Chris Mendoza. He will get his top 5 finish at another Toughest Mudder. He'll be just fine in Vegas. There's a ton of other names that haven't even run yet. Trevor Psychos was in LA, but his foot was not 100%, so he didn't run. Robert Killian has not run a Toughest Mudder yet. He'll probably run one. Hunter McIntyre was in Los Angeles on Saturday. He actually ran Tougher Mudder Saturday morning. I saw him there. He won, collected the $500, and then he skipped town. I did not see him that night at Toughest Mudder. I'm sure Hunter will run a Toughest Mudder before the year is over to get his contender status for World's Toughest. And I hadn't even mentioned the women. Lindsay Webster got 40 miles in LA, got first place. Let me just list the top 5 women from Toughest LA. Lindsay Webster with 40 miles, Sarah Knight with 35 miles, Allison Ty with 35 miles, Kayla Coblin with 35 miles, and then tied for 5th place, April Hartwig and Alex Rodania. They did 35 miles, and they finished exactly 8 hours and 30 minutes. They were running together all night long. I know they were running together because I saw them running together every time they lapped me, which was often. And like the men, there's women that haven't even run yet. Stephanie Bishop was there at Toughest LA. She didn't compete. She was doing some work for Tough Mudder headquarters. I saw her in a golf cart doing some shenanigans with the guys. Amelia Boone. Remind me to talk to you about Amelia Boone before we finish today. Amelia Boone is, I'm sure, going to be at World's Toughest this November, and so she'll want to run a Toughest to qualify for at least for contender, if not for elite contender status. What am I talking about? She's Amelia Boone. She's going to get top 5. She'll probably win 2 or 3 of them, and then she'll get 100 miles in Las Vegas just so she can have one of those orange jackets. So I know we're focused on Ryan and Chad right now, which is great. We should be. They had an amazing race in LA, but it's a long year. There's 5 more Toughest Mudders to go through, and it's going to be exciting. Don't forget there's a $10,000 bonus prize for most cumulative miles over your top 3 toughest Mudder races. And LA was a hard course. 2 guys got 50 miles. The rest of the courses, except for Whistler, are going to be a lot easier. Your top 3 courses for mileage, I'll tell you 2 of them right now. Chicago and Atlanta will be 2 of the top three events for mileage when the year is over. The third place one will be either Philadelphia or the UK. I'm not super familiar with the terrain on those 2 courses yet. Okay, back to the clips. Matt asked Chad what he thought about his competition as he was standing there at the starting line.
But Ryan, until someone beats him at something like this, you just have to assume he's invincible.
Chad talked about one of the reasons he was able to get that big lead on Ryan.
Just running with Ryan and Glenn for a while, but Ryan had some stomach issues early on, which is probably the only reason why I ever ended up with that much of a lead on him. But yeah, he's been traveling a lot lately and ended up having to stop for some bathroom breaks early. So yeah, it ended up being me and Glenn with Ryan Woods way out in front. But it was really fun riding with Glenn for most of the first 30 miles.
I think Chad's being humble here. Ryan is notorious for starting in the back of the pack at the beginning of races and coming on strong at the finish. Chad didn't need Ryan to take bathroom breaks to build a lead on him. Chad's put up 195 miles in the last 2 years at World's Toughest Mudder. The only guy with more miles over that time is Trevor Psychos, who's got 200. Chad talked about adjusting his expectations after he started the race stronger than he expected.
So I decided to just focus on what I could, which was myself and making sure I could get to 50 miles because I didn't think that was possible before the race, but all of a sudden getting through 30 miles in 4.5 hours, I realized that I just had to average an hour per lap and get there. So started trying to just knock out those hilly loops in under an hour so that I'd have a little cushion for that last lap in case I started dying by then, and just really pushed mile 30 through mile 45 and kind of figured that the only reason I was asking the gap was that, if ideally I'd be able to pace myself to finish right before 8:30 with that last lap. But if someone was gaining on me, I'd have to push faster and, just finishing by 8:30 wasn't good enough. And it turns out that was the case because, Ryan just started charging those last few laps and dropping times that are just ridiculous. They'd be impressive times if he was completely fresh, but at the end of 50 miles to drop your fastest laps of the whole race, like I said, I mean, he's pretty much the Terminator. He just is unstoppable. And, until I see signs of weakness from him at something like this, I just assume that he doesn't have any.
Matt asked Chad about failing an obstacle on the last lap.
It was the new swingers obstacle, and it's really fun. You swing from the trapeze type thing to a cargo net, but then you have to do a rope traverse, like the Tyrolean traverse, down across the water until you can drop down on the other side of the water. And I had done all the hard stuff there. I made the transfer to the cargo net, got my legs up, was kind of traversing backwards down the rope, and I was getting a little crampy at this point in legs and arms, but my feet just slipped off of it as I only had maybe 5 or 10 seconds to go, and legs just slipped off as I was trying to kind of transfer that weight back and forth, and it led to an extra 400 or 500 meter run. So definitely not ideal at that point, but I still didn't know how close Ryan was. I thought I still had a good 15-minute lead or so. So in my mind, it was like, okay, little setback, but I've given myself plenty of time to get to the finish by 8:30. Don't panic. It's going to be just fine.
Chad didn't mention it, probably because he didn't know, but King of the Swingers was one of the only 2 obstacles that had any significant penalty mileage at all. The other one was Funky Monkey. I don't know the exact distance of the penalties, but they seemed like they were about the same as the penalty for King of the Swingers at World's Toughest this last year. There's no tube crawl, just a run, but it was about that same distance. Last clip. Matt asked Chad what happened when Ryan passed him on the last lap.
But there is a hill that, with about a mile to go, that, I mean, they give it a name of an obstacle. Like, the hill itself is an obstacle. I forget what they call it. But, yeah, it was steep enough that I didn't see anyone try to run it all day. And I didn't try to run it. It was just steep and technical. And Ryan ran up it like he was doing hill sprints up it. Like, he was so freaking strong at the end. So, you know, any thoughts of like, oh, maybe I can hang with him and kick with him? Like, my legs wouldn't run a step up that if I, you know, had a gun to my head. And he was just bounding up it. So it's like, well, there goes that.
Those are just some sound bites and some highlights from the interview. It's like 45 minutes of quality stuff with Chad. You should check it out. The Obstacle Racing Media Podcast with Matt B. Davis. Other topics Matt talked about with Chad. Chad struggles with nutrition. How did Chad feel when he got passed up so close to the end? Matt talked about how some athletes look totally unbeatable until they're beaten, like Tiger Woods. Chad talked about why these races don't feel like competitions to him. It's a great, great interview. You should go check it out on Obstacle Racing Media. All right, last bit of news before we talk to Walter. This last week, Amelia Boone wrote something on Facebook that I wanted to read. Good news. This past weekend, I got back out on a Spartan Race course for the first time in 18 months. Well, sans crutches. No, I didn't race, but I ran the course with great company. Thanks, Scott Keneally and Amber Keneally. And played around on obstacles that I haven't encountered for far too long. Verdict: it may take a bit to build back up the strength and endurance that I've lost this past year and to knock off the rust, but mentally it was a much-needed victory. Rebuild the confidence, rebuild the athlete, maintain the joy. And in case you are wondering, I still can't throw a spear. See you out there this season. That is great news, Amelia, and don't worry about the spear because it's not an obstacle. Everyone is pulling for Amelia Boone. She is loved, beloved in the World's Toughest Mudder community. She's a 3-time champion. She finished second one year. And even when she's not out there competing, she's out there just cheering for people, motivating people. She was working for CBS this year as part of the TV crew. And she was still out there giving high fives and all night long. It was great. We are excited to see Amelia back at events and hopefully at Toughest Mudder and World's Toughest Mudder this year. So at World's Toughest, I'm kind of hoping for one of two things. Either Amelia and Stephanie Bishop team up for an all-women's team like they talked about on the TV show last year and see if they can knock out 100 miles, or Amelia, Stephanie, and Lindsay Webster all go in the solo women's category and make this triumvirate of competition and see who comes out on top. Either way, it will be a great World's Toughest 2017. As we talk to Walter, I want to share a word with you. Haboob, a type of intense dust storm carried on an atmospheric gravity current. Haboobs occur regularly in arid regions throughout the world, such as the Middle East, North Africa, Mars, and Lake Las Vegas, Nevada. You might remember the dust cloud or the dust storm in Mission Impossible 4. That is a haboob. Let's talk to Walter Lyon. Walter Lyon, tell me about your first World's Toughest Mudder.
First World's Toughest Mudder is 2011. That was the inaugural World's Toughest Mudder. I had done one Tough Mudder before that. It was the Tri-State Tough Mudder in November of 2011. And I thought, well, I did a Tough Mudder and I got slight hypothermia. Why don't I do a World's Toughest Mudder and see how tough I really am? At the time, I was about 6 months removed from leaving the Navy, and I was looking for something that was, at the time, obstacle course racing was in its infancy, and they really wanted to. It was something that was different, but it was familiar to me in that it was obstacles that the military inspired obstacles. So I jumped on board and I did Tough Mudder, and that was I fell in love with it. And then a month later, in December, they did it in December of 2011. I grabbed all my gear and I went to Englishtown, New Jersey, and I ran the inaugural. There were 700 of us. They had the monster truck and the orange smoke, and I ran the world's toughest mudder. I ran for approximately 4 hours, and then I got hypothermia, and then I tapped out. I got right about two laps done, and at the time I believe it was 8-mile laps, and it was just entirely too cold. It was bitter cold, and by the second lap I couldn't feel anything. And I was just trudging through, and people were following out left and right. That was the first time I had met Amelia Boone, and I got my first impression of her there. She was in a med tent for all of 5 minutes while probably 50 other guys were huddled around a heater, and she was the first person to stand up, and she said, "F this," and ran out the tent and continued running while all of us were like, "Go!" But yeah, so the second lap, I ended up, I was really hypothermic. I knew I was hypothermic because I had been hypothermic before in the Navy, being a Navy diver, and I recognized all the symptoms. I was like, oh, this is not good. And so I tried to do Everest, and at the time, they had a pipe on top of Everest that was leaking canola oil. So, it was next to him. It was plastic on top of oil, and so it was next to impossible to do. And so I ran up Everest, and I tried to grab the railing, and I missed, and I hit my forearm on top of directly on the railing, and my whole arm went numb, and I couldn't use it. And there was a log carry after that, and I couldn't lift the log up, and medical pulled me out of the race, and I was absolutely happy that they did, because I didn't. For me, it was like I didn't quit. I did. I quit, 8 miles before that, but yeah, I got about 2 laps in.
That 2011 World's Toughest is legendary for how hard it was. No one knew to bring very few people knew to bring wetsuits.
Yeah.
I think only 11 or 12 people actually lasted the whole 24 hours.
Yeah.
How many times have you done World's Toughest?
I've done all of them. I've done all the toughest. This is where I'm. Team 4 Eyes is one of the few groups of guys that have done all of them. I think at this point there's probably about a dozen people that have done, maybe 16 or 18 people that have done every single Worlds. I can name, obviously Jim Campbell, Mandy Baskin. There's a handful of us that are still, that have done every single one of them. But yeah, 2011 was a different animal, just because it was kind of xenophobia, fear of the unknown. We jumped into. I was one of the dumb few that didn't think to bring a wetsuit, even though I had, being in the Navy and being a diver, I've got tons of wetsuits. I just thought, Under Armour and all sorts of layers and stuff like that. I thought I'd be fine because I was fine in November, but it was below freezing. But yeah, it was one of those things where you get there and everyone's excited, no one knows what to expect, and it was so surreal seeing everybody just all the tents after the first lap. I would say 75% of the tents just disappeared. It was amazing. It was quite the experience, and they haven't disappointed since. What
do you think about New Jersey versus Vegas as a venue?
I like both of them. They both have their own personalities, New Jersey, there's more mud, obviously, more like dirty mud and not clay mud. There's trees. It's a little bit more. It's scenic, East Coast scenic, as in there's more trees, and the terrain is a little different. But I also like Vegas in that it's just you get these amazing sunsets and amazing sunrises, and it really plays to the location. The best part was the transition from Jersey to Vegas when you had that element of, oh no, I don't know what I'm getting into again. So that was pretty cool.
In 2014,
but I like them both, man. I like the desert. I like the heat. I like the fact that the desert has its own elements of just being super cold at times, and the haboob that that hit us in 2014. So it's it's again fear of the unknown.
What do you think about going back to Vegas for one more year?
I like it. I was hoping we'd change venues, but Vegas has it's worked its way into my heart. Actually, you know what? Ever since that first year in Vegas when they had that the windstorm, I was like, I love this. This is the best. If I can not expect to expect this, if that makes sense, I'll do this every year. And it's been cold every year, and it's been tough every year, and they've managed to change it up every single year. So yeah, no, I love it.
Do you have a favorite of those 6 that you've done?
Oh, the favorite. Yeah, it was the year we had the sandstorm, without a doubt. The cold is one thing, but you're so miserable in the cold that you can't appreciate how awesome it is. So the first 2 years in Jersey, that was awesome, but you're so miserable in that you can't feel your hands. You're just like wanting heat that you don't realize. You don't think about what you're doing. You're just trying to get through. You're just struggling through it. So when we had that sandstorm, when there was no one on the course, and it was a pretty neat experience. I remember me and Cassie and Joe, we're going through the course, and then the wind starts kicking up, and we're putting on our buffs. We're one of the few people with buffs on, and we're seeing that the wind's kicking up further and further, and we get over this crest, and the wind really picks up, and we're seeing the tents just start tumbling and flying into the water, and right then it was like another burst of energy, because it was so exciting, because you couldn't see more than 6 feet in front of you. There's other people. I remember I met Shanoa Career that year, and she's a beast. She came and she started walking with us through all this, all this sand, and it was really something else. There's something that none of us expected, and it was just an experience just to get through it. Was something in and of itself, and then to do the obstacles while all this is going on, it was ridiculous.
How long did the sandstorm last?
That's hard to say, because we got through about a lap and a half, and we couldn't. It was always windy that day, so we couldn't really tell when it started, when it ended. We knew when the wind started kicking up, right around like 10 or 11 o'clock. The wind started kicking up, but from that time all the way until the morning, the wind was still going. It was just that it seemed like the desert had run out of sand, if that happens. But the wind was still going, but you weren't getting as much sand as the sun rose and everything like that. So I would say it was at its peak from probably 10 o'clock to about 1:30.
Were you guys able to keep going the whole time?
No. We had we had a teammate drop out earlier in the race, and so we got through the sandstorm, and just about at like 2 or 3 o'clock. I think it was probably around 2 or 3 o'clock. We got disqualified at that point. It was just me, Joe, and Cassie. So we decided to kind of call it a night, but come back to the course and just stay with everybody and cheer everybody on. So we stuck around for the finish and cheered everyone on, but everyone was it was very similar to 2011 in that no one stuck around. Everyone just picked up and left because the sandstorm was just decimated the entire area.
That was one of the unique things about this last year, was that it wasn't a ghost town after the night. Probably 90% of the tents were still there in the morning.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It was. I think people are just tribal knowledge is being passed down from generation to generation. So you're seeing more people knowing what to expect. People are fastening their stakes a little bit more sturdy with big rocks and things like that. They're fortifying literally fortifying their pit stations so that they can withstand something like a haboob or a windstorm like that. So you're seeing people are able to last the night. I remember Shanoa Career, who I mentioned earlier. She was in 2013 or 14, first year in Vegas. She was the only person to bring one of those ice shelters that you, if you're going ice fishing.
Okay.
Have you seen one of those?
No,
it's
no,
almost
no.
like it's a sturdy tent that's almost an igloo.
Okay.
That you use when you're ice fishing. And she was the only person to bring that. So she had this big red ice tent that her parents were staying in, and so those became more and more popular because her tent was one of the only tents that were still available, that was still there. Team Four Eyes, being the geniuses that we are, what we did was we had like a little beach half tent because we're going to Vegas. We don't need a tent. 2013 was so easy. Oh my god!
That's like a sail.
That's literally what it was. We had the only thing that was keeping our little half tent down was a bunch of MREs that we had packed. But we used the berm. We do a lot of research before we go to the Worlds, and we looked where the wind was coming. We looked at the pit, and so we were able to strategically, and this is the military in me, we were able to strategically place our tent in an area where it would be shielded from the wind, based on our research. But we have like graphs, and we go straight up nerd into World Toughest Mudder. We have graphs. We have estimated peak and valleys in terms of temperatures. We know precipitation. We know humidity. So we go straight nerd.
Do you guys plan out your pacing pretty well? Pretty intensely?
We plan it out. Well, we have an Excel spreadsheet where we have the hours and the temperatures associated with the hours, and we have our estimated time based on previous years. So we know just about what our paces are going to be. So we have a relatively accurate gauge on what we're going to do that year. The only thing that we don't have a gauge on is our health, our fitness, and our ability to motivate ourselves. And that's the trifecta right there.
Tell me more about Team Four Eyes.
Team Four Eyes consists of 3 people, although we're like Menudo in that we go through team members, throughout the years as they come along and
guest stars also.
Yeah, it's like like when you used to watch Cartoon Express on USA, and they'd have Yogi Bear and some other cartoon teamed up together. Throwback. But so it mainly consists of myself, Joe Van Dyke, Cassie Hereth, and Amelia Boone. She's a kind of a grandfathered in member of Team Four Eyes, but and Cassie obviously. But the 3 core members are me, Joe, and Cassie. We met in 2000. We actually met in 2011. We actually formed a team in 2012, and we've been running together ever since. At every single event. So Casey, he's the motivator. He is, if you don't know Casey Hereth, man, he is the funniest. He can motivate it. He can motivate a rock into doing a somersault. The guy's amazing. At like 3 or 4 in the morning last year, I had like the flu, 102 degree temperature. I was just the most miserable person, and he's got his arm around me and go, "Hey man, look at the sunset. Look at that sunset. You see that? You're not going to see that too often." He's the guy that's like, he's keeping it light and motivating us. Joe Van Dyke, he's a Ironman triathlete. He's got like 130 triathlons under his belt. Just an amazing workhorse. Never gets tired. So he's on the team. And then you got me, and I think as the years have passed, I've turned into the team captain. In that I'm the one that tells everyone, "Hey, this is what we got to do." I coordinate everything. So I'm basically the team secretary, but instead of secretary, I prefer the term captain.
Do you guys run as a team, like officially?
We run as a team. As soon as they announced that they allowed teams in 2012, that's when we said, "Hey, let's form a team." At first, it was Team Sisu, and that name has been taken on into many iterations of other teams. And then we were like, "Well, what do we?" The third year, we're like, "Well, it's our third time, Team Three-Peat. Let's call ourselves Three-Peat." So we named ourselves Team Three-Peat. And then the fourth year, we always had those glasses on, the Wayfarer, different colored glasses. And we noticed that every year, everyone would be like, "Hey, Four Eyes!" And they would just call us Four Eyes because we were obviously wearing the glasses. And this would be the volunteers as well as the people running the race. And so we were like, "Hey, it's fourth year. Let's call ourselves Four Eyes." And so we started calling ourselves Team Four Eyes, and that's kind of the name that took. And everyone just started, recognizing us and saying, even at regular Tough Mudders, people are Team Four Eyes. So it's pretty cool.
Amelia Boone is a 3-time champion of World's Toughest Mudder. How did she meet up with you guys?
She's been, she was at the inaugural Worlds, and back when the World's Toughest Mudder community was like 100 people, it was a very tight-knit community. Everyone had rented a house, and Amelia was the person that was there's a lot of stories, but Cassie's first vision of Amelia was she was at Raceway Park on a light pole dancing, and she's very much a kid at heart, but she's always been there and supportive. Even when she didn't know our name, she always gave us hugs and everything like that. She knew Cassie first, but she's always been the nicest person in the world to us, even before she was Amelia Boone. So when she was just doing it like we do it, before she discovered that, hey, I'm a huge badass. When she was doing it just like the rest of us, seeing how tough she was always there to joke around and take a shot with us, and just be just a mensch of a person, So she's always been there. In 2000, I remember in 2012 when we were doing the lap, and she was like, "Guys!" She started screaming. Or no, it was 2013 because she was hurt in 2013. She was like, "Guys!" And she called us over, and we all came over and gave her a big muddy hug while she was injured. So I remember that being, and we've always taken a picture with her, coincidentally, at the start line every year. So she's one of us. She's one of the community. She's a great person.
You and Four Eyes were featured on the Road to World's Toughest Mudder show last year. What was that like?
That was interesting. I think we were all taken aback that they wanted to hear our story, and because we didn't, there was no application process or anything like that. They just kind of came out and they said, "Hey, we heard that you're the team that helps people out," and we were like, "We're the team that helps people out." We were like a little baffled by that. We were like, "Well, we help people out," but I thought that's what everyone does. But so we've kind of earned a reputation for sticking around a little longer, helping people out and helping people up and over the obstacles, and doing what Tough Mudder is about. And so they wanted to, follow us along, and so they followed us for a couple races, and they followed us at Worlds, and we ended up being on CBS Sports Network and on CBS for their special, and it was a great experience, man. We didn't know that we were looked at that way as the team that helps, but we're kind of noticing it now a little bit more. And we even told them, it was like, "Hey, we're here to compete, but yeah, we help people out because that's what you do at these events." And so I think they felt it was a compelling story, and we didn't mind being on TV. I was on American Ninja Warrior prior to that. But I did awful. I did just a second obstacle. It was the trampoline to the rope to the cargo net. Hit the water. They throw the towel on my face.
Sure.
National television, all that. I was like, you know what? If I have a chance to redeem myself a little bit, I'll take it.
You're a regular Rose Wetzel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Except not as athletic or as good looking. So.
What season was that?
Season 7.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was fun.
On the TV show, you said World's Toughest Mudder allows you to push yourself past the point where you think you had to stop. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's every single year. It's just they always say what is the toughest sport? Who is the toughest person? And you'll hear people say hockey because you're skating throughout the ice, and it's got the athleticism of football and the brutality of football, but the amount of games is basketball and baseball. So they'd say it's hockey, or they'll say it's like MMA fighting because you're getting punched in the face. And you got to learn all these different disciplines. You got to learn jiu-jitsu and boxing and grappling and all this other stuff. But for me, I will tell you 100 times over that it's people that run distance running, and then it's people in obstacle course racing, because events like World's Toughest Mudder, you're in there, and the only person you're competing against is yourself. There is a level of quit in every single person. And every single year you're finding out where that level is, and whatever your result is, 9 times out of 10 you're not. The first thing you're doing is not balancing it off someone else. You're looking at yourself and saying, how did I do previously? Did I get better? Did I do worse? So you're competing against yourself, and that's the hardest thing to do. When you got someone else, when you're working out, you're pushing yourself. But when you're working out with other people, it's a little bit easier because you're competing against other people. And so that competitive edge and that competitive nature is always there in some of these sports. But at World's Toughest Mudder, when it's 2 a.m. in the morning and there's not a soul on course and there's not a person to cheer you on, and you're just trudging through the desert carrying a cinder block, that's tough, man. That's tough. So yeah, no, that's what it's all about, man. It's one of these events and these sports that really kind of tests you. It's a cathartic experience where you're kind of figuring out who you are that year. Like, it's weird that I've got a roadmap that tells me from 2011 to 2000 and now how tough I am, but it exists, and everyone has that roadmap.
You can measure it in miles.
Yeah, you definitely can. You can measure it in miles, man.
Another thing you said on the TV show was World's Toughest Mudder is the one time of year where you find out who you are and who you think you are and who you really are. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it sounds a lot better when it's on TV. When I heard it, I was like, wow, I said that? Oh, good. They had me sitting in snow with just a T-shirt on, saying that my teeth are chattering while I was saying, it's like, oh, you actually got it out of me. Yeah, no, it's we all have our intentions. We all have our intentions when we go through these races. We know what we want to do. We know what we're setting out for. We're obviously trying to beat how much better we were. We're trying to be better. We're trying to be better than we were last year, the previous race, whatever it might be. But certain things in life, for me, it was a divorce. A divorce will come into play, or you'll get the flu. Maddie got walking pneumonia. All these different elements will come in, and they'll truly test how tough you are. And you can either succumb to those barriers in life, or you can move past them and kind of find out a little bit more about yourself. And I'll be the first to tell you that I've succumbed to those barriers more often than I'd like to admit. My background in the Navy as a Navy diver and a submariner and all this other stuff made me think that I was the toughest man alive. I came out of it 6 months out of the military. I'm like, this is going to be easy. I'm going to get first place at World's Toughest Mudder, and I'm going to show my Navy friends that I'm still tough, that you can maintain your toughness outside of the military. I'm going to show all these civilian folks exactly how tough military folks are. Two taps later and a bell tap, I'm like, you know what? This whole World's Toughest Mudder thing, yeah, it's legit. And so, it's one of those moments where I was like, I had to swallow my pride and say, geez, there's me tough, and then there's you tough. Those of you who finished World's Toughest Mudder, and that's what I'm striving to do. That's what I'm striving to be.
What was that feeling like when you realized, hey, you know what? I'm not going to finish this.
It was, oh man, I hate to use the word tough over and over again, but that's the only way to describe it. It was heartbreaking. There's a couple experiences in my life that have been heartbreaking. American Ninja Warrior and not doing as well as I wanted to was one of them, and then World's Toughest Mudder. There's a slew of them, actually. And then World's Toughest Mudder that first year was another one. Actually, every year I've quit, because I've quit a couple times. Right after Sandy, I quit because I didn't have power for. There's an excuse, but I didn't have power at the time, and so and all the kids were sick and all this stuff. But all these excuses compile. But that first year, American Ninja Warrior, man, those were tough because you have a conversation with yourself. It's one of those things where you're like, well, crap. You have all these expectations of yourself, and you have all these thoughts and these images of yourself, and then you eat a big slice of humble pie, and you're like, oh, that's who I am this year. Well, let's make myself better. Let's work on that, because that's where you need to start.
And then you carry that for the whole year.
Yeah. You carry it for about 6 months, because the first 6 months is depression, and then the next 6 months is like, this is when I'll start training, even though you should have started it 6 months prior.
How did it feel going into 2012 with 2011 as a memory or as motivation?
2012 was good, although that's the year that Hurricane Sandy happened. And it obviously hit the East Coast hard. 2012, it was in English town, and up until that point, I had lost power in New Jersey. Had lost power basically 2 weeks prior to the event, and so I had no power. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't work out. A lot of the places in the area were affected by it. So my level of motivation was higher than ever, but my fitness wasn't great, and it was one of those things where I just and my kid was sick, and there was just all these compiling things where I had the energy to go, but I just felt so guilty for leaving my ex-wife at the time, or wife at the time, ex-wife now, but leaving her behind to do this event. So I ended up tapping out after, I think it was the third or fourth lap. I told the guys, I was like, hey guys, this is I appreciate thanks for having me on the team, but I got a candle to light, a generator to refill, and a kid to give some amoxicillin.
I talked with Cassie last week, Cassie Hereth, about her journey with cancer, and you guys are dating.
Yes.
She called you the love of her life.
Oh, well, I would say she's the love of mine.
Tell me about Cassie.
She's a wonderful person. She's helped me through. She'll tell you that I helped her through a ton of stuff, but it's always quite the opposite. She's helped me through so much, whether it's divorce and parenting and these races or anything like that. She's just the most caring and an interesting person that I've ever met. And we just have this. We're both extroverted introverts, so we get along really well. We both want to. We're both fine in public and talk to people, but we really just want to sit down and just kind of hang out together and complain all day. But no, she's, you're not going to find anyone like her who's survived cancer as much as she has, who's dealt with adversity with her children as much as she has, who's conquered so much, from her military background, to her charitable endeavors and to what she does for the community on a regular basis. You're not going to find anyone like that. And she's and she's funny, and she's really hot. So those are all little ingredients for perfection. And that's what I strive and look for.
Let's talk about Arizona. Last weekend was Tough Mudder Arizona. I saw you out there with Carlo cruising on the course.
Yes.
What did you think of Tough Mudder Arizona?
He actually prefers Carlos with an S.
Carlos with an S.
Yeah, he doesn't tell that to too many people, but when you see him, you should tell him. You should just say Carlos.
We should tell everybody that.
Yes. No, we both did tougher. So Cassie, she like she does, she somehow found 13 people who had never done a Tough Mudder before and created a team out of those folks. And so we were, I flew out from Jersey and I joined her. She surprised me with an updated registration to do tougher because she knows that I'm competitive, and she was like, well, we're just gonna, because people that have done it for the first time, so they're gonna go a little bit slower, and it's in a later heat, so the crowds are gonna be a little bit, the crowds are gonna amass. So she told me to run tougher, so I ended up running tougher, despite not being quite ready. I'm still not quite in the shape that I need to be in. So I ran tougher, paced with Carlo, and did that first lap on a beautiful morning in Arizona. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous.
What do you think of the new obstacles that they debuted?
I liked it. It was the Arizona course is a much more flat course, obviously, with a lot more running. So it was definitely a runner's course. And so I'm much more obstacle heavy. I'm really good. I'm really efficient with my obstacles. And getting over them, getting through them. So they did a great job of kind of spacing out. So it was every like 3/4 of a mile to and probably 3/4 of a mile there was an obstacle to kind of get through. The mud mile was ridiculous because and you know this, the trenches were just so deep. They were so deep, and the mud was just sticky enough where you absolutely needed someone else to get you out of it. So it was, I had to find somebody, I had to catch up with somebody, and we just kind of use each other to get up and over the obstacles. They took the first ring out of Kong, so you had to do that leap of faith, which is also the worst obstacle in World Toughest Mudder history, leap of faith, back in 2012. But if no one knows what that is, you're walking across you walk across a beam of wood, which is no more than, I would say, 10 inches wide, that is just completely muddy, and you're jumping in the dark onto a rope cargo net that's about 15 feet away, and a little pad there. And I remember that was leap of faith, which was just awful because it was as scary as the cliff.
So if you don't catch that cargo net, you fall.
Oh, you fall hard. It's one of those. You ever seen Wipeout?
Yeah.
Where the person jumps and they hit the ball and they do that horrible back-breaking flip backwards.
Right.
That's exactly what happens because it's a good like standing leap, which is like a standing 6-foot leap. If you ever remember in like the 4th grade when they make you do that, you put your feet together and you'd leap in the sand, and you'd always get like 4.5 feet, 5 foot. But same thing. It was that standing leap into the cargo net. I remember a couple people broke fingers and stuff like that. But it was going back to Arizona Tough Mudder. It was when they removed the rung from Kong, same thing.
Yeah, Matty Gregg talked about he hated that obstacle. Like he went on probably 10 minutes talking to me about how much he didn't like that obstacle.
Oh, it's the worst. It was the worst.
What did you think of Tougher Mudder, the competitive aspect?
I liked it. I think there was 75 people in our heat. I think I came in right around like 20th or something like that. It was a nice little aspect of it. Obviously, they had guys like Wesley Kerr in there, and so it was nice to kind of know that you have elite athletes running in the race. But it was also nice to be the first ones onto the course when the course is unsullied and stuff like that. So, even if you're not the quickest person in the world, I definitely recommend it just to kind of see. Because when you get to the Blockness Monster and things like that, and you've got 2 or 3 people, you really got to work on your coordination and coordinate with these people, or else you're going to get left in the dust. So it was a nice little experience to kind of run the course basically solo, and then kind of we ended up doubling back, Carlo and I, and catching up with Cassie and her team midday, and we ran the course with the group. So. Tougher is a different experience than doing a Tough Mudder, for sure. And I would recommend that anyone and everyone do it, just for the experience of kind of seeing how tough the course is intended to be.
It's competitive, but it's still true to the spirit of Tough Mudder. You need teamwork to get over Blockness.
For sure.
Are you going to get your Holy Grail this year?
It's a world's toughest.
Yep.
So yeah. Definitely. I usually do around 2, 3, 4 Tough Mudders, including a World's Toughest Mudder in there. So I'm definitely doing Toughest in Philly, and then I've already got the Tougher under my belt. Going to do Tri-State, and then World's Toughest.
Did anything crazy happen on the course in Arizona this week?
Just when you run with Carlo, that is about as crazy as you need. Because he stops for puppies. That's what he does. His thing is to hell with the obstacles. If there's a puppy in his path, he will stop. And he'll converse with the puppy for a while, even when the owner is telling him to get away.
Like a spectator on the course that brother dog.
Yeah. No, it was Tough Mudder does a great job of catering to your fears, So there's always a hesitation, whether it's electroshock therapy. They took that first ring out from Kong, so you had to do that leap. And so they do a great job of kind of catering to your fears. And so there's always some element there that's going to get you to take a gulp before you jump. Kong was that for me. Kong was. That's where I was like, oh, geez.
How'd you do
because you fall face first during that. It's a different experience than falling on your butt.
Were you able to grab the ring?
Yeah. And it's not too hard. It's just that you play out every scenario in your head before you jump, and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to take a swan dive into the concrete here. But you play out the scenarios, and before those scenarios can end with you being a blood splattered smear on the pavement, you got to jump. That's what it is.
Do you have any goals for World's Toughest this year?
Yeah, obviously one of our goals is always to compete and to be competitive and to complete World's Toughest Mudder. But with the mileage that we've been normally getting 55, 50, 55, 50. As a team, it's a little harder. It's a lot harder with 3 or 4 people on your team. And obviously you're slowed down. I would argue that a 2-person team is faster than a 1-person team. If you get the right people, you saw with Albin and Atkins how quick they were. But with a 3-person team, it's we're all, Cassie's a stupendous runner. Joe, Team 4 Eyes we all have something that we contribute, like Captain Planning, Earth, Water, Wind, Heart. I'm the top heavy chicken-legged guy who's super strong upper body, who helps them get through, helps boost them over anything that they need help with. Joe is just a regular workhorse who just goes through everything. Casey, he's the motivator. But we found that the 55-50 mark is kind of what we typically do. So we're changing up our training a little bit, focusing a little bit more on distance running and upper body upper body work and just taking it a little bit more serious with our diet and stuff like that. So this year we're hoping to get, I would say 65. Big goals are 75 as a team. Definitely top 10.
What do you say to someone who's nervous about signing up for World's Toughest Mudder?
Welcome to the club. That's what I would say. I've already got one of my friends who I met at Tri-State last year, him and his wife. I already got them. I talked him into signing up. And there's always a hesitation there because people just assume that they can't do it. They assume that they can't do it. But this is one of those events where it's not about placing in the top 10. It's really about how well you do and finding a little bit more about yourself and how tough you really are. And so I know actually this year more than any other year, I've seen that a lot of people have kind of come up and asked more opinions on World's Toughest Mudder, and a lot more people who have never done it before, who have been kind of, wondering if they should do it, have actually have taken the plunge and are doing World's Toughest Mudder. So it's one of those things where you just have to kind of bite down and do it. And if you really want to find out about yourself, whether it's a 15-mile goal, 25-mile goal, or 75-mile goal, you just need to just like you and take along this podcast. It's informative. People obviously like it, and it's one of those things, those leaps that you took, and a gamble that you took because you wanted to do something. It's they have to have that same drive. They have to want to do it. You can push them all you want, but it's got to be within them to kind of find out if they're going to do it or not.
Special thanks to Walter Lyon for appearing on this episode. Well done, Walter. Next week, international television star Tiffany Aub makes her World's Toughest podcast debut. Don't miss it. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. I sincerely appreciate those reviews. New episode next Tuesday. Thanks a lot, you guys.